Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and I trust the week's gone well. Outside my window, it's graduation day at the University of Nairobi. I'll put up a photograph of the proceedings, and you can see Nairobi, the central business district, in the background as well. I congratulate Aliko Dangote on winning the Forbes Africa Person of the Year for 2014. He said many things in his acceptance speech, one of which was, "It is only we Africans who can make Africa great." Called for a minute's silence for Ebola victims. His predecessor was the Nigerian Minister of Agriculture. He was the Person of the Year for 2013. And he was talking very evangelically about agriculture. And he said the price of oil is crashing. Africans cannot eat crude oil. And Ricky Wahi, who's the founder of the ABN network who holds the CNBC franchise in Africa, said Africa is not for the faint-hearted. Mindspeak tomorrow with Frank Matzart, the CEO of Trademark East Africa. Breakfast from 9:30, start at 10, finish up at 12. And I was just going through Frank's resume. Over the years, Frank has designed and overseen over 40 major innovative and successful programs, totaling over $1 billion in the fields of trade, financial sector development, privatization, investment, climate reform, market development, and skills development. Frank holds 2 master's degrees in economics and archaeology and is an IMRO certified fund manager. Trademark funded by governments and all kinds, and essentially trying to accelerate the East African community, and have made significant strides, and I think it'll be very interesting to see what he's got to say. Going back to my article about currency and oil warfare, you will recall I said this plan to undercut oil was exquisitely constructed and executed. The Russian ruble has been crushed. The Russian central bank has dropped $100 billion defending the currency, and that's a very shock and awe, and a bullet has not even been fired. Today is 1 year since Nelson Mandela passed away. And I reiterate what I said a year ago, that may his exquisite soul rest in eternal peace. I'll put up my favorite photo of Nelson Mandela. I can't remember who it is. I think it's Associated Press, but it really is a great photograph. And some quotations which I like of his. "There is no passion to be found playing small in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living." I learnt that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. I am fundamentally an optimist. Whether that comes from nature or nurture, I cannot say. Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed toward the sun, one's feet moving forward. There were many dark moments when my faith in humanity was sorely tested, but I would not and could not give myself up to despair. That way lies defeat and death. Lead from the back and let others believe they are in front. The greatest glory in living lies not in never failing, but in rising every time we fall. I took a photograph of a statue and the message at the bottom of the statue when we went to see the World Cup, and it was written "A Celebration of Hope." I still think Nelson Mandela was really a totemic figure on the continent. The astronomer Carl Sagan memorably said there were more stars in the universe than grains of sand on all the beaches in the world. That estimate has been refined more recently to 10 stars for every grain, or roughly 100,000 million, or 100 sextillion stars. That took me back to Hunter S. Thompson and The Edge. There is no honest way to explain it, because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. Political Reflections. Vladimir Putin made a State of the Union speech yesterday. Says foes hope to dismember Russia. President Putin accused Russia's enemies on Thursday of seeking to carve it up and destroy its economy, to punish it for being strong, but said his country would rise to any challenge. In a fiercely patriotic State of the Union speech, the Kremlin leader trumpeted his annexation of Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula, praised the Russian people for their strength, accused the West of pure cynicism in Ukraine, and said economic sanctions must drive Russians to develop their own economy. We are ready to meet any challenge of the times and win, he declared. Shifted blame for Russia's problems onto the West, accusing enemies of yesterday of trying to bring a new Iron Curtain down around Russia. Foes, he said, wished on Russia the same fate as suffered by Yugoslavia in the 1990s. There is no doubt they would have loved to see the Yugoslavia scenario of collapse and dismemberment for us, with all the tragic consequences it would have for the people of Russia. This has not happened. We did not allow it, he said. So determined was the West to destroy Russia, he said, that sanctions would have been imposed even without the crisis in Ukraine. I am certain that if all this did not take place, they would come up with another reason to contain Russia's growing capabilities. Whenever anyone thinks Russia has become strong, they resort to this instrument. An analyst, Dmitry Trenin of the Carnegie Moscow Center, said Russia should now brace itself for a very difficult 4 to 5 years, in which the stakes are exceedingly high. And then I like this sentence about Obama, Chuck Hagel. It's a very interesting article in Counterpunch. Just read you one sentence. He can't exactly back off and say, actually, we made a mistake here, trying to encircle Russia militarily for no good reason, certainly not for any reason pertaining to US security. Putin accused the West of trying to contain and subvert Russia for decades, if not centuries. That took me back to an article I wrote on the 6th of October, Current World Affairs, Fluid and Uncertain. Took me back to Don DeLillo. In societies reduced to blur and glut, terror is the only meaningful act. There's too much everything, more things and messages and meanings than we can use in 10,000 lifetimes. Only the terrorists stand outside. The culture hasn't figured out how to assimilate him. It's confusing when they kill the innocent, but this is precisely the language of being noticed, the only language the West understands, the way they determine how we see them, the way they dominate the rush of endless streaming images. I've got a link to the best photos of the year 2014, and the first one is absolutely frightful. Eric Scott Hunsader, who's on Twitter, produces some interesting market analysis. When Draghi speaks, markets freak, and put up a diagram of movement in the futures. Have a look at it and you'll see it's quite correct. Euro 123.78, and that it bounced off 122.80 yesterday, which was an August 2012 low, on the feeling that Draghi is yet to pull the trigger. Dollar index 88.72, Japanese yen 120.03, dollar up for the 7th week in a row, rising above 120 for the first time since July 2007. Swissy 0.9715, pound 156.42. Aussie 0.8374, India rupee 61.85, South Korean 111.14.61, Rial 259.15. Egyptian pound 714.97, we've been there, and the South African rand now at 11.21.46. My view is we're going to 12. The dollar has rallied 7.1% in the past 3 months and is the best performer of the 10 developed nation currencies tracked by Bloomberg. Euro has actually increased 1.8%, and the yen has slumped 7.6%. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart, 88.72 last, emerging out of a long entrenched disequilibrium, headed a lot higher. As I said in August, when I said the dollar has been punching higher, things tip big, the dollar might soar. In September I spoke of a meaningful broad-based rally, and at the end of September I spoke about the point I'm making that the dollar has just started getting going. There will be blood in the water. There is a small window if we want to be the sharks, I said. Euro dollar 123.78, my target is 1, the figure in 2015. Dollar yen, I'll put up a 1-year chart and you can see what a dramatic move that's been. I like this, these pictures. Margarita Carrillo Aronte wants people to know that real Mexican cooking is light and healthy. And from the left, there's some corn soup, some barbecue langoustine, chicken and lemon is featured in her cookbook. People have this wrong idea that Mexican cuisine is cheap, oily, fattening, spicy, and so hot it burns your mouth, she says in an interview in London. The real Mexican food is refined, the flavors are elegant, it's a very nourishing cuisine. Commodity markets, Brent extended losses from a 4-year low as Saudi Arabia offered customers in Asia record discounts on its crude, bolstering speculations defending market share. WTI also dropped. Futures fell as much as 0.7% in London, headed for a second weekly decline. Saudi Arabian oil co Saudi Aramco cut its differential for Arab light sales to Asia next month to $2 a barrel below regional benchmark, according to a company statement. That's the lowest in at least 14 years. The kingdom doesn't want to subsidize Iran, Iraq and Venezuela and is willing to let the market decide prices, said Daniel Yergin. Crude slumped 18% last month as OPEC maintained its output quota. It seems what the Saudis want, the Saudis are going to get. We're going to see prices continue to be under pressure. It's still game on. Brent slid as much as 50 cents to $69.14. And it closed yesterday at 69.64, which was the lowest close since May 2010. WTI has dropped. Prices down 1.4% this week, have dropped 38% this year. WTI fell to $66.35. It's, however, marginally up for the week, 0.4%. Yergin said it's basically a new game in world oil. The Saudis have almost $800 billion in foreign exchange reserves, so they can wait this out. I'll put up a 1-month chart. My target is $50. And just to reiterate a few points I've made on the 1st of December, I said the US has emerged as the new price setter for the oil market. The meeting in Vienna merely confirmed that the US has wrestled control of the oil markets. President Obama, while getting creamed in the midterms, has been a very subtle, skilled and hard-nosed exponent of currency and now oil warfare. This plan to undercut oil was exquisitely constructed and executed. I called it a very 21st century shock and awe, and a bullet has not even been fired. The oil price collapse marks a major inflection point. The global consumer is back. I'll put up a 6-month chart of crude oil. I think we're going to $50, as I said. On the 13th of October, I put out a $50 target. When I said who kneecapped oil, I said the oil market has always been very high beta and exhibits magnified price reactions to the demand and supply dynamic. Where markets are net short, price setting can be determined by the last buyer who is paying up in a net supply deficit scenario. That's why you see those big price spikes around futures expiring. However, this is a binary thing. In a situation where there is a net surplus, the price setter can be those last sales transacted at deep discounts, like we're seeing the Saudis do right now. The conditions, and I wrote this on the 30th of October, and I will explain them momentarily, are optimal for a complete washout. And we used to call it a blow-off bottom. It was a more earthy description in my time, down as far as $50 a barrel. Markets overshoot, crude oil does it big time, and any and every model needs to consider such a price outcome. I said then the big game changer has been US crude output, which rose from 5.7 million barrels per day in 2011 to 8.4 million barrels in the second quarter of 2015, and has now topped 9 million barrels. I referred to something that Thomas Donilon said in 2011. He said America's new energy posture allows us to engage from a position of greater strength. Increasing US energy supplies act as a cushion that helps reduce our vulnerability to global supply disruptions and price shocks. It also affords us a stronger hand in pursuing and implementing our international security goals. I described the US administration as like psycho, and I said the US has flooded the oil market and the commodity is now a geopolitical spear. It is the US that is the new price setter for the oil markets, and this is a deep and important geopolitical development. The new price levels will have immediate, enormous geopolitical and financial knock-on effects. We've seen that in Russia. Place intolerable pressure on oil producers, and particularly those operating from a higher base price. I didn't realize, but it's Nigeria's Minister of Petroleum, Diezani Kogbeni Alison Madueke, who was elected the first female president of OPEC last month. Gold last trading at 1203.455, but has had a strong rebound over the last few sessions. Coming to Africa, Louis Michel, the co-president of the ACP, says with an average economic growth rate of 5%, and population growth of 2.5% per year, Africa has become indissociable from globalization. Yet much remains to be done to make these assets really work for Africa. Growth must be sustainable and inclusive. Interesting article on MarketWatch where a fellow called David Snowball, publisher of the Mutual Fund Observer newsletter, estimates that only about 0.3% of the average portfolio of the US, just $3 out of every 1,000, is invested in Africa. Mugabe brands handover speculation idiotic and foolish as hardliner Mnangagwa's star rises. Mugabe apparently said if you are European-minded, you do not belong in ZANU-PF. Then there was some research by where it shows that Zimbabwe's workers' confidence hits the doldrums. Only 1 in every 10 of the respondents indicated that they believed the economy was improving, and 88.4% said the economy is not improving. You will recall not too long ago, President Zuma in South Africa turned down a visit by the Dalai Lama. Well, surprise, surprise. Jacob Zuma kicked off a state visit to China on Thursday, and I'll put up a photograph of him meeting the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. Ethiopia launched a $1 billion debut Eurobond with a term of 10 years and yield of 6.625%, and attracted an initial order book worth more than $2.6 billion. Merkel is urging German companies to increase their investment in Africa. Europe should not miss out on things at this point, Merkel said. She met with the Ethiopian Prime Minister Desalegn I'll put up a photograph of the two of them. South African all share down just under 1% yesterday. It's up 6.779% this year. Back below 50,000. Dollar rand 11.2155. My target is 12. The Egyptian pound 7.1497. The Egyptian stock market rallied sharply yesterday, 1.65%. It's up 39.457% and just 3.598% below a multi-year closing high reached on September the 30th. The Nigerian all share has closed at 21-month lows. It's down 19.729% year to date. On the 10th of November, I wrote, turning to the markets in Africa, the Nigerian Naira and the all-share index have been wagadugued by the collapse in the price of oil. And then I'd also put out a price target of 200 for the Naira. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 7.226% in 2014. It's now at 17-week highs, and this is all because President Mahama dialed up Madame Lagarde at the IMF. Put up a link for her Mindspeak session, and she said many things. And when Hannah gave her roses and said, "I want to be like you," Madame Lagarde replied, "Work hard and you can be anything you want to be." Put up a photograph of myself and Hannah at Mindspeak. Angola government bond trading is set to begin today. That should be interesting given the currency and the outlook for oil prices. Coming to Kenya, a Kenyan warplane crashed in southern Somalia on Thursday, with the Kenyan military saying the crash was due to technical problems, while Somali rebels said they had shot it down with a missile. The aircraft had been on a combat mission. A spokesman for the KDF said the pilot reported a technical problem on returning from the combat mission. Al-Shabab said they had shot the plane down. "We hit the Kenyan jet and downed it. It was bombing Bulagud town yesterday." He said the group used a missile so that the pilot was burnt inside. You can't rule out that they might have acquired a few, but it is not a capability that they've demonstrated in a clear manner, said Mark Schroeder, African analyst for consultancy Stratfor. My conclusions are that this would mark an inflection point in their capabilities. And then there's a subsequent report where they're reaffirming they shot it down. Fighters struck the low-flying aircraft with a missile. Muhammad Ali, a resident of Bulagud, said that he saw a plane burning in the sky following a burst of gunfire. So we've got to keep an eye on that because that might mark a dangerous increase in Al-Shabaab's capacity. There have been 136 terror attacks since 2011, when Kenyan soldiers were sent into Somalia to help push back Shabab. This is The Economist. Most have been small scale, a grenade tossed at a bus stop or a volley of bullets fired into a church. But the group's ability to mount more complex attacks seems to be improving. Well, it certainly does if they shot the plane down. And my concern remains, as it did in September 2012, that what appear like uncorrelated spikes and paroxysms of violence conflate, become more broad-based and amplified. That note, I'll put up an image of Westgate from 437 days ago. Nakumatt is planning a strategic partnership by the middle of 2015. The biggest retail chain in the region by outlets expects to bring a strategic investor to buy a stake by mid-2015 as it looks to expand in the region, the head of strategy and operations said. The company has annual sales of $600 million and has held talks with at least 2 serious investors who have shown an interest in partnering with Nakumatt. Retail industry in East Africa is attractive because of its rapid population growth, urbanization, macroeconomic stability and growth potential. That was A.T. Carney. Ramnamurthy declined to identify the investors Nakumatt has spoken to and wouldn't say how much the company plans to raise. They have 7,000 employees, 38 branches in Kenya, operations in Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, plans to expand into South Sudan and Burundi. Interesting report. Kenya's arrested 77 Chinese in internet hacking case. Police in Kenya consulting technical experts to determine if 77 Chinese nationals arrested with advanced communications equipment in several houses in an upscale Nairobi neighborhood were committing espionage. The Chinese were arrested since the weekend with equipment that Kenya's Daily Nation newspaper said was capable of hacking into government servers. We have roped in experts to tell us if they were committing crimes of espionage, said the head of CID. These people seem to have been brought here specifically for a mission which we are investigating. Domino's Pizza joined Kenya's fast food market for regional growth, targeting new outlets in the port city of Mombasa, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda. We look at Kenya as the gateway to East Africa, he said. There is a growing middle class, growing spending power among consumers, and strong receptivity to international brands. Competition among overseas restaurant chains has been on the rise since KFC, owned by Yum Brands, became the first US-based fast food chain to enter Nairobi in 2011, followed by others including Subway, Naked Pizza, Ice Cream, Cold Stone Creamery. I said, given the urbanization and the increasing population density in our cities and its demographic skew, very lots of young people, this is a no-brainer. Kenya shilling 90.256 last. Nairobi all share closed yesterday at a record, rallied 1.1%. It's up 21.3611% year to date. Safaricom races ahead of rivals with 4G network, betting big on the home internet market segment with the launch of an advanced 4G technology to drive its data services. Launched a high-speed wireless internet network that is initially available on Mombasa Island, parts of Nairobi such as Gigiri, Runda, Buruburu, Parklands and Kabete. Network gives Safaricom the ability to provide its own advanced data services to an affluent market currently being served by fiber-to-home providers like Jamii Telecoms and Wananchi. The launch will give us a chance to deliver broadband internet to homes, which currently we cannot do with the 3G network. So exciting developments there. Safaricom closed at an all-time high of 14.55 yesterday. It's trading higher today, traded as high as 14.90. Safaricom through this morning was up 38.433% year to date. They had very strong first half results. I did that interview with Bob straight after that was earnings release, and the share price has really surged since then. The link for the interview with Bob is on Rich Wrap-Ups. The Nairobi NSE 20 jumped 1.14% yesterday, so it was a pretty broad-based move higher. And Kenya Airways was a standout, rallying 5.99% as buyers take note of the worldwide airline stocks rally that's been going on because of the lower oil price. Once again, thank you for stopping by. Wishing you a great weekend. Hope to see you tomorrow at Mind Speak Breakfast 9:30, start at 10 Intercontinental Nairobi. Free forum to come to, just bring your mind.